Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar titled Increase Your Efficiency and Compliance, Automating Records Management, presented by Elantis Solutions. Elantis is your guide helping you achieve your business objectives using Microsoft technologies. So whether you're looking to increase your competitive advantage or improve your maturity in Microsoft 365, you might be just starting out your journey. No matter where you are, we're here to help. In today's session, one of our Microsoft specialists is going to demonstrate how you can customize and automate records management processes using Microsoft Purview. This will help you keep your data safe and compliant with regulations. And now I'm happy to present Jennifer. She's one of our Microsoft experts, and Jennifer has over 20 years of experience in enterprise content management and in records management using the Microsoft platform. So she's got a lot of expertise to share, and it's going to be a really great session. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you, Jennifer, for presenting Increasing Your Efficiency and Compliance, Automating Records Management. Please take it away when you're ready, Jennifer.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Amy. Appreciated it. So welcome. I'm very excited today to present for you records management in Microsoft 365. My name is Jennifer Piercy. With Mother's Day coming up, we were asked internally to share some stories for a Moms in Tech campaign that we're doing. So it kind of brought me back to a time when I was young, and my mom, she worked as a librarian at the for the National Research Council. And I used to join her at work. So I remember her handing me some index cards, and I remember playing with those index cards, and I had fun playing with those index cards. I didn't know who Dewey was, but I was very happy to play with his index cards, referring to the Dewey Decimal System, of course. So I think that was kind of where these seeds started. When I discovered information architecture, I dove right in. And happy to see like content types and things like that in SharePoint, as it really helped me submit my journey in information architecture with SharePoint. So what we're going to be talking about today is some common challenges that we're seeing in records management, and how we can address some of those challenges, of course, with Microsoft Compliance and Purview. And in particular, we're going to dive into a little bit of demos around disposition and automation, as well as I'm going to share with you some tools and tips, and I have some references to share with you as well. So first, we're going to dive into some of these challenges with records management. Jeff Teeper had done an interview recently. Jeff Teeper is what we commonly call in the community the father of SharePoint. He's basically driving a lot of the innovation in SharePoint within Microsoft. Anyways, there was an interview done with him recently, sometime in the last month, and he identified in that interview that currently there are approximately 2 million sites spun up per day. And aside from that, there's approximately 2 billion documents being created per day. That is a lot of content. Very interesting interview. I included in the references at the end of the slide. But this brings us kind of to the one of the two top concerns is we have all this data. We don't know what it is. We call this dark data. It's not classified, it's not protected, it's not governed. So a concern around that, of course, is complying with regulations and governing, of course, your sensitive data. A common approach that I've seen time and time again, and I'm sure will continue to, is the position of keeping everything. You know, why label it all and manage it all? We'll just keep everything. However, there is a risk with that, and the risk being typically data breaches, and that's a tangible cost that we can associate with this risk. The average breach costing just over $8 million, and you could really kind of nail that down to approximately $242 per record. That's a big cost for keeping everything. Over retention of records consumes not only poses that risk, but it also consumes resources throughout the organization. You want to ensure that you're retaining what you have to and removing what you don't have to reduce that overall risk. So again, just to summarize, records may exist in many places. So if you feel like a cat herder, you're not far off base. I've walked into a room where we're talking about records and look over and ask what's in that box. Like I said, there are literally records everywhere. And some people, as far as users go, some people like to take the path of least resistance and just want to get their task done. So sometimes if a system is putting too many constraints on their choices, path of least resistance, we'll just kind of click through to get the task at hand done. So sometimes that could result in misinformation being associated with the content that they're working with. And it is pretty overwhelming with all the regulations that we're being hit with. The technology is constantly updating, and as our requirements. So a lot of challenges right then and there, but a particular challenge that I'm going to speak to is licensing and rules. And I swear, once we figure out the licensing, engineers go behind the scenes and start coming up with a new schema for licensing. Anyways, what we knew and understand today is that to get to your minimal set of compliance within M365, you do require an E3 license and gives you access to the basic records management capabilities. So you can put on like retention labels and things like that. You can manually apply them, or you can use Power Automate to push labels as well. If you have an E5 license, however, that does give you access to the full feature of the compliance of all the records management, the sensitivity labels, you get the data loss prevention, you get disposition, and a whole lot more. And then we've got this Purview, which requires at a base level you to have an E5. It's an add-on to the E5. And that gives you the Purview and records management. And there's a Copilot from Microsoft as an add-on. There's a conference taking place this week, so keep your ears open. There's some very interesting content that's coming, and I'll speak to you one little piece of it a little bit later. Now we've got licensing understood, and there's probably layers of complexity inside of there. I want to talk about the roles a little bit. Oh, sorry about that. I was just missing a role there. Okay, so there are many roles within Purview to assist you with your tasks at hand. These roles are based around these pre-built compliance solutions. And Microsoft takes that role-based access control stance to provide the least amount of privilege. So for example, just to give you an example of how those roles are working, I have a user account who is a global administrator, which is a global tenant administrator. You have access to everything. However, you actually don't. If you're not in the appropriate role within Purview, you won't get access to things like disposition and things like that. So they are powerful roles, and they definitely slice and dice your your area of responsibility lies. And I want to bring up the example of disposition reviewers, because that's kind of been a contentious one. There's been issues around this particular role group being able to access and see content that they need to dispose of. And just to recap on the Purview offering, and just to kind of summarize, we do get things like this communication compliance. Like, it's wide Purview as far as the offering. We get the e-discovery, data layer protection, and there is a lot. There are, of course, limitations around these new Azure groups that we get to access as well, called administrative groups, but be cautious around using them around records management. For example, there's an administrative unit within Azure. If you want to apply a retention label to SharePoint content, you can't due to a restriction to only support users and groups. So that administrative unit, I believe, was initially set up to help facilitate Azure Active Directory accounts, which we're now calling Entra IDs. So it kind of makes sense to me at that level why the administrative units would only have access to users and groups as opposed to sites. So just be aware of that limitation that exists. Moving on. So again, just to recap what Purview gives us, we have this enhanced compliance center. Again, with the E3, you get the basic compliance, but with the E5 with Purview, you get the enhanced compliance center. And Microsoft has focused on creating these compliance solutions. And there's a large number of them. And I think there's 60 roles that support those. Provides us, data security and risk compliance, e-discovery, and more. So it helps with the the data lifecycle management piece, as well as with the records management piece with disposition, labels, policy, and we get this data classification dashboard to work with to manage those. So we have Purview, and we have your organization, wherever you may be in your journey, because it is a journey with regards to embracing records management. So the approach that this deck kind of speaks to is knowing and understanding what you have, knowing and understanding your business regulations and your regulatory regulations, as well. Engage with experts to help with this exercise. You may want to figure out where you are as far as records management goes on the maturity scale. You can engage with experts who have experience with maturity modeling, for example, to help you determine where you are in your records management deployment. Take into consideration things like your regulatory and business compliance that you have to take into consideration, and we'll help you come up with a roadmap to get to your target state. So with that, I'm going to dive a little bit farther into the defensible disposition. So this is a pretty important topic where we need to prove that we were the disposition, basically, of a piece of content, for example. And Microsoft does retain for 7 years proof of disposition. And I'll kind of show you that history screen where you can get to that information. I haven't tested it. It hasn't been around for 7 years to be able to thoroughly test this feature. But I just basically kind of want to talk about this disposition here, defensible disposition, and the approach you can kind of take to start tackling disposition. So in coming up with this presentation, I really had to plan it out, because it does take sometimes up to 7 days for some of these labels and policies to apply. So again, on that topic, you really want to plan out your disposition and the routine that it'll go through. And a governance process to help oversee that is ideal. And what does it mean to use a risk-based approach to prioritizing business critical processes? What does that really mean? And it's basically taking, an approach. I had a cute story about hiring minions because they're cheap. They don't like money. It doesn't taste very good. It doesn't taste like bananas. But it does bring into the organization, a risky, or brings, to your organization insider risk. And what insider risk is essentially sabotage from the inside. And what I love about Microsoft, what they've done recently is they have set up basically a staging of an event such as insider risk. So you can actually see your system execute through a mock scenario, which is really helpful to understand some of the moving bits and the end results. So I encourage you to definitely delve into some of those if you're able to. So you want to basically prioritize on business critical processes based on their potential impact to your business and likelihood of occurrence. Factors such as complexity, dependencies, and organizational constraints should also factor into that as well. So if you can organize your data disposition into modules, it will help you plan out your policy deployment. So defining the boundaries of the policies and the systems for data disposition and prioritizing based on some logical factors such as the category, the type of data, the audience, and things like that. You want to leverage a prioritized listing to system and application based on compounding risk. So you want to analyze your system and your data, your compliance, and eventually you want to know the content types, for example, and the kind of attributes that you need to apply or leverage. And then, of course, your disposal of data. So I'm going to help show an illustration of where we use things like content types to help label a policy, for example. Yes, to help, yes, with the policy. So with that, we're going to jump into a demo. And again, these things do take like up to a week to apply. So my intention was, you won't see a lot of moving parts, but I will show you a lot of things that have happened over the last week, for example. So the first thing I want to show you is a disposition policy lookup. So if I have a minion farting around on his site and you wanted to know what is this label that I'm looking at, for example, let's just have a look at a document that a minion might be working on, for example, and I can have a look at the compliance details of a single object just by going into the more information. And inside of that more drop down, you'll see compliance details. And inside there, this window will pop up, and what this is telling me that there is a label called building maintenance. Now I'm wondering, what does that mean? So to figure out what building maintenance is as far as the label goes, we can hop over into Purview, and we can jump right into data lifecycle management section. And inside of data lifecycle management, we have this policy lookup. So if I want to look and see what policies are applied to a site, this is where I would go. Just going to copy this address. And I've selected site as my scope. And of course, I put it in a URL, and it will go out and it'll comb the site to see what policies are applicable or applied to on that site. So we have 4 policies applied to that site. It'll tell me the type of scope, so whether the policy is scoped to the site or if it's organizational wide. You can't apply a policy to a single item. It's typically done at the site level. And of course, this also tells me what applications are adhere to that policy as well. So if I want to drill down, so I've got these labels applied, and I kind of want to know a little bit more about some of these labels. I can basically click on it, and it'll have this information panel pop up, and it'll tell me things like if it applies record or what the retention period is. So this one basically is it's an auto apply label. What does auto apply mean? So I've set this label to look for content within specific sites. Again, this is site scoped, that contain specific words or phrases. So what that means is I'm able to, for example, use a tag from my term store that I have applied on a piece of content, and a deployment stage or phase as well, to lock down a specific piece of content. So what this is really doing is when a product goes out of life cycle, so we stop making this product, we don't need it anymore, I basically want to tag these as records, keep them for a specific period of time, and then dispose of them. I have 2 days for keep and delete just for purposes of demonstration. You typically see something like, 2 to 5 years, things like that in here. And the preservation lock determines whether or not you can still touch the, you can still look at the content, but some of these policies will determine whether or not you can make changes to them or move them, things like that. There's restrictions you can put on based on the stage of life cycle and the actions that you want to apply. So if I want to dig into this a little bit more, I can hop into records management. I can look up, oops, sorry, I just hopped over to the wrong page there. Just going to look up the particular policy called product. There you go. So this is the product specification. So the label policy that I showed you uses this label. And this is basically how I had set up the label. And I'm just going to pop into the admin view, the edit the label, just so you can kind of see the process of setting up a label. So of course I give it a name, I give it a descriptor. I can apply. So if I've got my records classification, 1200 or 12,000 is, product is my product category. The area that is responsible for that area, and any kind of subcategories I might have. So essentially I can apply my classification or my file plan would show evidence here, but of course I don't have that set up for this, this scenario. So you can just leave those for blank. So essentially I chose the option to retain the items for a specific period of time, and then they'll be deleted from where they're stored. And I chose this, of course, where you select the period of time that you want to retain the content for. So at this point in time, I want to basically mark the item as a record. And the reason I want to do that, because when the product is no longer being manufactured, there's no reason to make changes to those documents anymore. So we basically want to lock them down as a record, which means basically you won't be able to edit or delete them. Only admins will be able to remove or change the label. Now the caveat around you can move content as long as it's within the M365 or within your tenant. That record label will stay with the object, and I'll show you an example of that. So no worries about this, about if content gets moved around within the structure or within your tenant. So what happens after the retention period? The deleted items will get removed. And that is essentially it. So we retain it for a period of time, and then we delete it. And that's essentially what that label applied will impose. And as I said, when the documents are deleted, you will see a record of that. So let's hop over into the disposition tab. So I have a couple of dispositions that are kind of outstanding or pending at this point in time. I was having an issue a little bit earlier with running content search, so hopefully this isn't going to give me any grief. And it does take a little bit to open this screen. So I did mention there was a role, one of the two role groups that I had mentioned earlier for the disposition reviewer, allows the ability to actually use this viewer. So what this viewer does, it lets me as a disposition manager, that's the name of the other role, lets me go in and the second role group, even though I don't have access to this site, this panel will still expose the content out, because you as a disposition reviewer need to see the content that you're disposing of. So they facilitated this, not giving you access to anything else in that site except for this, just the content. And it's, again, showing you a viewer of it. I believe I have a document behind this. If it was something like an image, it'd basically just tell you that it can't render the image, and it'll just give you a link to the content, or give you the option to download it and consume it offline. It's taking a little bit of time, as again, I noticed there's a bit of a performance hit currently. I don't know if there's something quite often with conferences going on. Sometimes they'll light up some features and things like that. So it is what it is. We're in a shared tenant. So while that's taking some time to render, I want to bring your attention to this section of the disposal page. So these are the actions that I can perform now on this document. I have taken the second document and I, for example, added a reviewer. So I have a reviewer who does not have any of the rights that this account does. And that's why I've got a secondary browser window I'm popping in, and it's basically associated to a different user. So this is like a, East Coast, West Coast, whatever. This user doesn't have access, as you can see by what's available on the left-hand side of the Purview section of M365. You can see there's a lot less links I can get into and view and see. Even when I just go into records management for each of them, there's a lot more options for the I'd call this role. So this is basically a God role, but it's been given all the records management roles, so it has the ability to do pretty much everything in Purview. And this user it's not anything except a disposition manager and was given the view. So and there's something to take into consideration. Now I just sent this review, I think, over yesterday. So it does show that he has one item to review, but I see a count there's 0. So I don't think for some reason it's gonna render, but we'll pause and we'll let that load up while I jump back to the records managers disposal screen to finish describing these actions that you can take on a item that's been labeled for disposition with review. So again, you can dispose content and never have to review it. But if you have, especially early on in your journey with records management, it's recommended that that you turn these on so that you understand and and you're aware of how they're working. So I had assigned a reviewer earlier. I'm not going to go ahead and do that at this point in time. I can extend. What does that mean? So I can extend the period of time before the disposition date. So, for example, there's a bit of activity. We may want to make a product 2.0 or something like that. Anyways, we may want to, for whatever reason, extend the life of this piece of content. And I think it was product specifications was one of the criteria as I chose. So if I want to extend the period, I can do so. I can set a custom period of time or set some defaults. And of course, the reason for why I might be extending the disposition label on this content. And my expectation is that when I look at the compliance details, that okay, so it won't reflect in here as to the disposition date. This does allow me, though, as you can see when I clicked on here, and again, I am a records management owner, essentially. That's not a role. So there's not a records management owner. I'm just illustrating the level of access that this account has, which is highly elevated. It allows me essentially, when I clicked on the label for the document, take me to a screen where I can actually apply a different label. Again, RM administrators, I believe, are one of the roles that can go ahead and override labels. And again, that can also be, I believe, specified on the label itself. So one of the things that I wanted to show you was the doc type and the product name. So these are basic. This is basically metadata. So product name is coming from a content type. Up to my library settings so you can see this. So the product name, as you can see, is manage metadata, which right. So this is my term store. So I have established these set of terms that I can consume. Basically, it's these are my product listing, and that's where the one of the pieces of information is that it's attached to the label. And the other one, I believe, is the status column. Sorry, I apologize. The first one was the doc type. It also comes from the same repository. It's from my term store. Not only do I have products, but I've also got document types. And I have listed out, user agreements, or sorry, product agreements, user guides, and product specifications. So that's where those are coming from. So it's able to leverage my existing metadata to be able to apply those labels with. And I think that was about it that I wanted to show you within the document library. So by the simple act of tagging these, I know this is probably not an actual product specification, but this is basically how I'm going to go through and tag it. And this will eventually be picked up as a record when these two are set. So as long as it's not setting final, it'll completely ignore it. But as soon as I set it to final and it's a product specification, that's the criteria that that label needs to be applied. So I noticed, and this is where it takes up to 7 days to apply a label. So I think it took about 4 to 5 days to get these first initial labels applied. And one of the things that you get once a piece of content is declared as a record is some indicators. So one indicator being it's got a little lock screen on there. And of course, we saw in the compliance details that it is in fact labeled. And it tells you what you can and can't do with it. So you can't, right. So I would expect that this lock and that label indicator, it won't show up currently, even though this was done earlier this morning. Like I said, it could take 4 to 7 days for the label to appear on the item or on the document. Okay. I think that was what I wanted to cover in disposition. There's an issue with this rendering, and I'm not really sure why it's
Jennifer, can
not.
I interrupt you with a couple of
You sure
great questions?
can.
I know we
Yes.
said we'd hold them to the end, but there's some good ones
No.
in here that I wanted to make sure we get to.
Excellent.
So one of the questions was, can you explain a policy versus a label and why both are required?
Both are not required, first off. So a policy can exist, but policy will. So let's talk about the hierarchy first off. So a label is something that gets applied to an object, an item. You cannot apply a policy to a label or an item. A policy can consist of multiple labels, for example. So I can have a retention label, or I could even have a disposition. I can have multiple retention labels within a singular policy, and there's an order of execution. So the longest retention policy always wins. So if there's two labels within a single policy that conflict with each other, the label with the longest retention period will win. And if there's a label that has more than one disposition associated with it, it'll always take the longest period of time, meaning it will take the longest disposition time. So a label is what's applied to a single object, and a policy can be used to wrap basically a site around. See if there's anything within the site that adheres to the labels within. So you wouldn't apply a policy to a single item either. So policies are used to help expand where the labels are positioned in the organization, and it's again around content. It's around types, things like that. So I hope that addressed your question.
Great.
I hope that answered your question.
You.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. And
No
one
problem.
more, regarding retention times, one attendee asked if they could set those themselves or whether it automatically ends at 7 years. So is that customizable?
Absolutely customizable. Yes. Yes.
Perfect.
I said I had set my retention period for 2 days just to allow some quick turnaround time to show for the demonstration. So,
right.
Good question.
And one more, I know what you're demonstrating is in SharePoint, but can this apply to all of Microsoft 365 or is it SharePoint specific?
No, it's not just SharePoint and OneDrive specific. Labels can be applied, of course, we're talking to like Exchange, content, messaging, Teams as well. And I believe there's Viva in there as well. So yes, it can apply to many. I have the most comfort and familiarity with content types, so I kind of drove my story through what I understood most, which was on the SharePoint side.
Perfect. Thanks for letting me jump in. I'll let you carry on.
No problem. No problem. I love questions. So to continue, where you would go to see basically the disposition of records is in the records management disposition, this dashboard here underneath the records management. We've got our disposition panel within there. We're able to actually view the contents to make that decision if I want to, as a reviewer, if I want to keep the content or what do I want to do with it. And the actions that I could do with it are basically I can add other people to review it. I can extend the lifetime of the disposition. I could relabel it, give it a different label. So yes, if this became, I guess, no, that's a bad scenario. Basically, I could apply another label to it. Or I could approve the disposal. So one situation where you might want to relabel a piece of content. I kind of came up with a scenario for this one recently. So for example, this product specification uses like Power Automate. And there's a issue with flows and apps. If you are the creator of those flows and apps and you leave the organization and you're the sole owner of that either app or that workflow, it can stop working because the connections that you establish inside of those are linked to your account. So a common good practice is to have a secondary owner on those flows or those apps. So bringing back to what we're doing here, you can actually have a label trigger a workflow. And I've done so, but I don't have the premium connector, so it didn't let me, so it's not letting me apply it. But essentially what I could do is basically relabel this to say that when I can do certain actions on to those flows. For example, when the product end of life is reached. So I can do things like add a service account to those apps or flows, for example. I can do that within Power Automate. So I can basically trigger Power Automate to go do a bunch of actions to, I don't know, close up some things or to archive things. And you can execute that by using another label. So the downfall to that scenario, though, is it does require the premium connector because you're using triggers that are based on compliance. And that's where they inject that premium Power Apps connector license. So just want to kind of talk about that scenario a little bit, about what the kinds of things that you can action on at the end of the life cycle of your content. Okay, so back to my slide deck. Minions always just make the exercise of testing a little bit funner. So to recap, we're on a journey here. We're on a records management journey. You want to make sure that you know your regulations. You need to know your business regulations, so your business compliance. Having resources. I cannot stress this enough, but having dedicated resources to your in your journey for records management, I believe is critical to the process, and enabling them to do their job. But coming up with policies and procedures, understanding that the technology, and of course, applying your retention schedule, your classification schedule, coming with a file plan, which I believe might be in one of these next steps. Yes, so classifying your content, essentially, you can classify your content all across your environment, as well as third-party data. You can automatically classify. So I did show you an example of the auto classification. So I didn't have to do anything to that document that was a product specification, except that I indicated it was a final document on the status side of things. And the system will slowly, but automatically come along and pick that up and apply that label. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about auto classification, and one example of. And ensuring immutability while enabling collaboration. What does that mean? That means that my record would still be available for me to consume. I just can't make changes to it. But what Microsoft does on the back end, if you do make changes, it actually will, or if you do make modifications, it will actually keep a copy of that. So a perfect example is when you want to come up with, version 2.0 of your policy that is now declared as a record. Your policy 1.0 is a record. It's quite often you want to, create a 2.0 from that. What Microsoft will do on the back end is retain a copy. Unbeknownst to you, there's a hidden directory inside of SharePoint, if this is where this document lived. A copy of that 1.0 would be retained. And again, that's for audibility and things like that. Ensuring immutability essentially means that depending on the controls that you place on the label, will determine whether or not it can be modified or moved. So at this point, throughout the journey, you've got your content is classified. You've got your disposition. You've got disposition reviewers who are reviewing content before they're getting deleted. You are showing that proof of destruction through that panel that I had shown you. That's got the history that shows you what's been disposed. And again, that is retained for 7 years. Can't prove it, hasn't been around that long, but my expectation is that will still be there for 7 years, which brings up an interesting scenario that if two companies were to merge, whose RM system would win, I guess is the word I'm looking for. So I guess in that scenario, I would find out who's got the most mature records management established, because again, these immutable means non-removable, non-changeable, things like that. So I was thinking about that scenario last night, is those marbles that roll along. What would you do in that scenario? Who would win? And what would the arguments be? So yes, these are the things that rattle around. Anyways, proof of destruction of records. You need that defensible disposition, and that's where that kind of plays in. So you need to defensively demonstrate adherence to the process, and that's where the policies and the audit logs and things like that will be of assistance. So on the automation side, I kind of showed you a little bit about the content types. So I'll just pop into that. Sure, I got my correct user. Okay, great. This finally did render. It shows me the contents of the document. It wasn't like it was a detailed or a thick document at all. I just used some simple text. And this being the disposition, pending dispositions, I can look at a little bit of information about the document, navigate to the library if I have permission. And of course, this document doesn't have any history. So if I would have had some history of somebody else reviewing it, putting on comments, they would appear here. So let's get back to our the automation. Okay. So I kind of reviewed this already a little bit with regards to the document type and the status. And when the record, when I published the policy, the auto apply policy, let's just go back into and look at our policies and how we create a auto labeling policy. So the auto label policy that I used for the product was the one we had looked at essentially. And let's just go ahead and, oops. Yes, this is just creating a new auto apply policy. So these are the options that we have. One of the questions came up earlier is do these labels and policies apply in more locations than just SharePoint? Absolutely. We could even apply policies to attachments, which is not something we've always been able to do, because an attachment, and you've got the document or email, but there may be attachments kind of hidden inside or attached with the document that's not as easy to get into and look at. So you can now apply labels to attachments. And links shared in Exchange, Teams, and Viva, as well as Copilot, which is kind of creeping up everywhere. We can apply, and this is the option that I had chosen earlier, is that I can apply a label to contents that have a specific word or phrase or properties. Gonna jump in next. So if there's a word that that I would like to capture content that has used, so we don't want to use the word fugly. So just as a rough example, if any content on my SharePoint that comes up with the term fugly, I want to be made aware of it. So I'm not going to assign any administrative units, and those are those Azure administrative units I had spoken to earlier. And this is basically the type of retention policy. So we have the adaptive or we have static. So I prefer to use the adaptive in this case. Which means you can, apply it to attributes or properties that define like the user, the groups, or the sites in the organization, where static is set to more like location based. So a piece of content, for example, that can have a term can live in many places. So if I had it set to static, it could fall outside of it could end up outside of its original container. So in this case, I would prefer to use adaptive because the terms will stick with the content. So in this is where basically I tell, I inform the policy as to where I would like it scoped. So this is where I set it to the SharePoint sites. Oh, right, those are the connectors. Right, the reason I went with static is because I can assign a location. Right, so let's switch over. We're going to apply this to a singular location, or we could do it on Exchange mailboxes, but I won't delve into that. I'm not nearly as versed in Exchange as I am on the rest of the platform. So SharePoint and OneDrive accounts. So essentially, if any content out of line, we apply label to this content. So now we want to associate that label, that retention label, which I showed you earlier, which is a 2-day, keep it for 2 days and delete it. So I will add that label. Or sorry, I will add that disposition label. And now I have options. I can test it out, run it against a scenario, or I can just go ahead and turn it on. So I've already basically applied this. So I'm not gonna enable, I'm not gonna turn it on, I'm not gonna hit next, I'm not gonna hit finish. I'm just gonna cancel it from it at this point in time. But just wanted to kind of show you the flexibility that you have, especially testing it out before you're running it. And you really do want to be aware of testing, especially some of the records, because once they're created, they cannot be deleted. There are certain scenarios, like, for example, if a policy is in use, you cannot delete it. And there are certain cases where if you declare, you create a label, you create your policy, you publish your policy, even at that stage, you can't delete the policy because it's already established in the system. So plan it out, understand it, understand the what it is that you're applying and the scope, and the implications of playing around. If you really do want to play around with these labels in an environment that it's okay to, create label, create content that it might stick around for 7 years. But if you use an environment like a dev tenant, Microsoft offers these tenants that you can stand up for a period of time, whether it's 90 days, 6 months, I can't remember. They like to keep them fresh to make sure that the latest technology bits are installed. Use one of those and break one of those. Done it many times, it's fun. I learned a lot. But you want to break your teeth in another environment rather than your own. And even if you were to set up another environment, you're still impacting the whole tenant. Pardon me. So you want to make sure to leverage something like a dev environment. So away with you, minions. We're kind of onto the tools and tips. And I'll check real quick if something got lit up this week. And it has not been lit up yet. So for anybody who might have a SharePoint Premier license, so that's basically their premium, SharePoint Premium license. You'll see some new capabilities pop up sometime between April and May. Well, I was hoping it would show up. I was kind of excited to show you guys. But essentially, you're going to see this new little filter appear at the end of your icon. Again, this is if you have the SharePoint Premium license. And this is called the content query. And sorry, content query is a term from old SharePoint. That's what they're calling this new feature. Essentially, it's going to give you some great searching capabilities. I'm very excited for that to be coming down. So on the topic of tools and tips, I had mentioned maturity modeling. It's a very powerful tool to help you on your journey, help provide you with a roadmap based on your company's compliance requirements, regulatory compliance, appetite for change, resources, things like that. And helps develop a roadmap to get you into a more mature record state. Of course, change management and user adoption is a huge part of this. Without people, we wouldn't be able to do a lot of these things, at least currently in our current state. We're not to a point where Copilot can do everything for us quite yet. We want to consider user adoption, absolutely, showing folks how to tag records and when they can't delete a document or because it's declared a record, or allowing them to self tag sensitivity labels, for example, inside of Word or PowerPoint. So one of the frustrations is okay, I really want to know what exists. I don't care if I didn't look at it before. I want to know all of what exists. So there's an area within records management called content search, and I can definitely show you where it is. It's just unfortunately I threw an error when I was trying to run a search. So basically, I was running a search to find out anywhere where this label is applied. Powerful tool. It's like, oh, I got this label. Where is it being consumed? So eventually, I can define my search. So this is basically informing this search that I want to look for content type of document that might have a project in the title. But what this is going to give me, it's going to give me a true results. Regardless, it's not taking into consideration any personal views or shares or anything like that. It's just giving you raw data output. So if you really want to actually know without any of these weighters or any of the other analytics that come into play, or searches that limit where you can search, you'd lean on this content search. So this is something that you might want to investigate a little bit more. Basically, I create the search and I can kick it off. I can kick it off ad hoc at any point in time. I can rerun this search. So basically, this search through 109 mailbox. It searched through a whole lot of content, sites that I specified, all sites. And basically, this was last run today. I think, no, sorry, this was last run last month. So I bet you dollars to donuts, if I were to rerun this, I'd probably find some new results. So while that's running, I'll jump back into my tools and tips. As far as like a last tip, take that incremental approach to applying your policies and your labels. Progress slowly, as in, check on your usage. So you can put out a series of labels and or policies and check on their usage, check that they're being consumed, making sure that users kind of understand what it is that they're expected to do. And you can take a good time, take this time now to adjust if you're not finding the results that you're expecting. And do we have any questions?
Yeah, we have a couple more. I know we covered a few throughout.
Right.
There is a question about licensing. So do non-records reviewers that have records assigned to review also have to have an E5 license?
No. They would have, I believe E3, because you get the basic compliance. But no, you shouldn't, because it would just give you access to that one capability.
Great, thank you. And actually, one more licensing question. I know Microsoft licensing is quite complex.
It is a challenge, absolutely. Yes, and I am no license expert, so please don't take my answers as gospel.
No worries. If you're not sure the answer, we'll get back to this person. But is the compliance dashboard included in business premium licenses, and can Purview be purchased as an add-on?
It's an add-on to the E5. I cannot speak to your business premium because I don't know the bits of that. I don't know the details of the business premium. I remember there used to be like a small business tenant kind of thing that you can get. So I couldn't speak to that one. I apologize. But I know for sure, yes, Purview is an add-on to the E5 license. You can't add it on to E3. You have to add it on to E5.
Great. Okay. Well, there's a few more questions, but as I said, we'll follow up with those attendees afterwards. Feel free to reach out to us. I think in the chat, we'll have shortly a link. If you have additional questions, if you'd like to connect with Jennifer or one of our other experts about your Microsoft 365 challenges, issues, questions, we would love to chat with you. So that link should be in the chat. If you book a call today, you will also receive a limited time offer, 25% off of a records management maturity assessment. So Jennifer referenced that maturity modeling, building out that roadmap for optimization, and that's definitely something we'd be happy to help you with and develop a plan to help you get the most out of Microsoft 365 and manage your records effectively. I'd also like to take a moment to mention our next event, which is on June 5th. Our next webinar is on Mastering Intranet Essentials, your guide to seamless communication and collaboration. So in this session, we'll demonstrate how you can use Microsoft 365 to create an intuitive and engaging intranet. We'll share tips on how you can create an effective information architecture, how you can overcome common challenges, and ensure that your intranet is well managed and it stays up to date for years to come. Likewise, we'll have a link in the chat to register for that so you can get it in your calendar. It'll be great information on improving collaboration and communication in your organization. Thank you again, Jennifer, for presenting this informative session, and thank you everyone for attending today.